Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
This is Byron O'Neal, media editor for Comic Book Yeti, and I'm sitting down today with Eisner, Harvey, and Schuster Award-winning and nominated cartoonist artist Ramon Perez to talk about his all-ages webcomic project, Kukuburi, currently funding on Kickstarter. Thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, first of all, I feel like I need to, as a also fellow 40-year-old, wish you a happy birthday, because I think that was what, like a week ago? Yeah.
It was, yeah, last weekend. It's the last year of my 40s. So, yeah, time flies.
I know. Celebrate those late 40s. I'm right there with you. Well, I caught up reading this, and I got this, since we're sort of same generationally, I got a Tank Girl kind of Powerpuff Girls meets Alice in Wonderland vibe, but you know, everybody brings their own filters to the table when they read something. So tell me what it's all about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Kukuburi originally started off as a webcomic way back in 2007, when at the time, so I've been freelancing my whole career, but at the time I was working in kids' books and a lot of editorial advertising kind of work. And I had done a webcomic previously called Butternut Squash, and with a buddy of mine, and I had joined Raid maybe a year prior, and we had been talking around the circle of kind of just wanting to do more of our own stuff. And so we initiated a kind of a webcomics collective at the time called Transmission X, which then got truncated to TX Comics, and we did quite well. And when I was planning to do for this collective was actually do a crime noir story. But as I started writing it and building it, it became a little bit too big for the web, if you will, if that makes sense. And so I was like, you know what? I flipped through my sketchbook, my idea book, and there's this like idea I jotted down, and I just had written Kukuburi beside a couple of character designs. And I just liked the idea of creating a world where anything went. I could come here and play after a long day of work, after kind of being, you know, in the stringent world of kids' books and editorial and advertising. I could let loose, and that's kind of how Kukuburi started. It was like so like Nadia almost was like a kind of almost like a vessel for my kind of feelings at the time, where she's just kind of stuck in this routine and was trying to escape. So basically, the Kukuburi revolves around Nadia and the whole idea of an Alice in Wonderland kind of style story, where she falls into a whole new world, meets all these characters, and there's this kind of sense of freedom and joy in this world, this escapism. But then slowly things bubble to the surface, and you can never really leave your responsibilities behind. And she kind of gets enveloped in this larger than her life sort of tug of war between the powers that be in this realm, kind of thing. And that's kind of like the simplistic version of it. But at the end of the day, I started off with a place to play, very much inspired by like Little Nemo in Slumberland. You mentioned Tank Girl. I was a huge fan of Tank Girl, Jamie Hewlett, and Powerpuff Girls were definitely on my radar back in the day. So it's like all these things just kind of feed your imagination, and they kind of live there. And I think Kukuburi for me was just a way to get a certain aspect of my ideas out, that kind of silly, nonsensical, bizarre scenario where there were no rules to confine me, or just make it too defining of a place where I had to live by reality, if you will, kind of thing. So yeah, I had planned it for about a 600 page to 700 page run originally. And back then I even wanted to do a book, but back then it was very cost ineffective. And I had actually approached some publishers in the past, but publishing is a weird world where it's like, I had meetings with Random House, and they were like, oh, this is great, we love it, but we need to make a few changes, because like we want to skew it younger. Yeah. Or the art style wasn't appropriate. Maybe like, the character was a little bit too feminine, or so I was just kind of like, I just want to do my own thing. So and hence I just continued on the web until I could and then till I couldn't when my life got a little bit too busy, basically. And it's actually now almost probably a decade since I stopped updating consistently. And it feels like a nice time to return basically to the world. I find myself in similar emotional state, and it just seems to have drawn me back into the world that I created, 15 years ago, basically.
Yeah. So you started in 2007, if I'm.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it went up to January of 2012, and you picked it back up in January of 2020, roughly.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think there's a couple of small sporadic updates in between here and there. I would get some, email over the years requesting if I'm going to finish. Also hate mail.
Yikes.
People, the expectation on the internet sometimes can be kind of hilarious. I just my career took off around 2011, 2012 into the direction of kind of more mainstream comic books. Something I'd always wanted to do, and up until that point had no real success. But the right project, and then suddenly all eyes are on you, and that kind of just spiraled me in a whole new direction of a decade, pretty much. Like, I think I dabbled in mainstream comics up until 2011. Here and there, I did a couple of one-offs for Marvel, DC as well. But it wasn't until 2011, 2012 when I did Tale of Sand, where that kind of was the impetus for me kind of going full tilt into comics for pretty much exactly a decade, really, where that became my primary career, I guess, if you will. So,
right.
Yeah, it's interesting to come back and a 10-year cycle to something that I left behind so long ago.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
The title of Cotton Candy World, which felt like a very accurate description after reading all of it, because it felt like a pack of Starburst candy exploded on my eyeballs. Like, I'm a color junkie, and the palette is like exquisitely vibrant. There's like all these Easter egg tones, which feels really in pocket for the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a very definitive style. So how did you go about crafting that world in your head? Is it just like freeform?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I'm naturally drawn to really bright. It's actually it was actually a deficit or harmful when I went to mainstream. I was always over coloring things. I would actually color like a cover for Marvel and then literally desaturate everything by 50% to make it work. I think I grew up on newspaper strips. That was like my first real introduction to comics. So Garfield, Hagar the Horrible, Mother Goose and Grimm, all that kind of stuff. And that stuff is just brightly colored Easter egg stuff, Odie's yellow, Garfield's orange, and there you go.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what just trained to my color palette. And as for the designs of the characters and the world, it was pretty much kind of like a whimsy, in the sense where I would just kind of take certain elements of my own, childhood or my own imaginings regarding, things I maybe sketched or drawn or thought about over the years. So like a bunch of some of the monstrous characters are actually things I had drawn as a kid or something I had. I think like one character, the big white marshmallow guy, Zongs, is like he's a misinterpretation of one of the characters from Star Wars. Like he's like if you're a Star Wars fan, there's a character called I think his name is Muftak. I think he's like a white fuzzy character from like the bar, and this is how I always imagined him. But when the toy came out, I was like sadly disappointed, because I was like, it had nothing to do with my imagining version of this character. So just little things like that were just like I was taking these ideas I had as a child and kind of just realizing them with a skill set of a professional, basically.
Okay.
And as for the coloring, that would just like I said, I think it's my default natural coloring method, basically from Sunday comic strips.
Okay.
Yeah.
I fell in love with it immediately. I really
thank you.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think one of my favorite comments on the comic early on was someone had commented where it was like, I love the color so much I want to lick my screen. And I was just like, and I was like, okay, that's a win.
That fit with my Starburst analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of characters in there to fall in love with. One that jumped out to me was Rendo. He's definitely one of the more fascinating ones,
Okay. Yeah.
And I had to ask, so you have a purple quadrupus, like
Yeah.
so half an octopus, quadrupus. I had to put this together. It took me a second, right?
Yeah.
But he has this penchant for hats and speaking French.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
I think I mean I love hats. I'm a huge hat lover, and I think it was funny because sometimes, like when I first started doing the comic, I had drawn up maybe 3 or 4 of the characters. So there was like Rendo, Nadia, Nug, and Mr. Bones were like the 4 original, like in my sketchbook, basically. And they're pretty much true to form for what they originally looked like with some slight modifications. But when I started to lay out and plot out the story, it really began with Nadia, her chameleon, and she had to her first encounter was Mr. Bones, and it kind of then played up from there. But the whole tangent of in the beginning of the story where Mr. Bojangles goes to meet Rendo in the opening sequence came out of the blue. Like it wasn't planned, and I just started writing it and I started drawing it. And it was just one of those things where the character kind of just took me on this journey where we meet Rendo, and he's wearing the hat and all this stuff, and suddenly hats became a thing.
Okay.
And this whole side thing developed outside of my main story that I had originally planned. But I fell in love with it so much, I was like, all right, this makes perfect sense. And it's just one of those great nuances of when you're building a story, that those happy accidents that happen when you kind of stray from your original outline, basically. But yeah, I love hats. I would often wear I have a very vast collection of a variety, not probably so as many as in the comic, but I do love it. So I like just the idea of these creatures wearing human hats. I thought was kind of silly, whether it's a bowler hat or a flat cap or a top hat or whatever it might be, and kind of adding this idea to the power of hats was a kind of a natural evolution, because I think there is kind of like in our world, hats for the most part began or defined class to a certain degree at some point or another. Now, not so much, but when they originated,
Sure.
Only the elite wore top hats. The flat cap was probably a worker's cap, so on and so forth, right? So I love the idea of the power of hats. And so just to create a whole brigade with these magical hats that have power just like made sense in my head, and it just became a natural evolution of this weird tangent that my brain went on. But yeah, it was just like but as for the character design of Rendo, like he was just doodling one day on the, having a drink, and you're suddenly drawing this character. And to be honest, I have no idea where he came from. But he's one of the most popular. Like I've had friends make here's made me little things over the years.
Wow.
And stuff like that. So it's been great to especially have these characters kind of inspire and be enjoyed by readers,
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that kind of struck out to me is I've really enjoyed some of the fan art responses to the campaign, especially the origami recently. That was like, I didn't know where that came from.
That was amazing. That is, I'm just going to step out of the screen here for a second, but that was by Joseph Wu, who read the comic back when it was first online, and he made these beautiful like origami. This all folded from I think this is one piece of paper. Like it is just astounding, except for the eye, I think, obviously, but everything else,
right?
It's just astounding. And he just was, I guess he came across the webcomic and was inspired by the characters and took up the challenge of trying to make the origami out of them. And it was just blown away. But it was one of those aspects that you don't ever consider when you put your work out there. And back when I was updating regularly online, I would receive quite a few, and it was always flattering to see you've inspired someone so much where they'll draw a rendition of your character or characters. It's mind blowing. But yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things when I went back and read it, and I found it was refreshing about that particular webcomic presentation, it was the narration that you had at the bottom. You got a small window into your life, what you were thinking, what was going on. And I always say you can't dismiss the art from the artist, right? So have you been surprised getting back into this, kind of relaunching it, reopening it, bringing it back to the world, that kind of response? We talked a little about the fan art, has it always been that way? Has everybody sort of resonated with these characters?
I mean, obviously resurrecting something a decade later is always a worry, because like the audience that was reading it maybe back then was 20 and now they're 35 or 40.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it is weird to go back to something so long after I had basically not updated regularly, but the story always stuck in my head. And of course I was very worried, launching a campaign for it, because like, does anybody care? At the end of the day, I want to finish the story, but does anybody actually want care if I finish the story or not? And the response has been overwhelming, just to see people excited about the return of the story and the characters, and actually just eager to find out where the story will go and unfold. So I'm excited to have these readers that have been patiently waiting for a decade or more to come in and support. And I'm also excited at the potential of actually new readers discovering it through, whether it's the Kickstarter platform or conventions when I have the book on hand or whatever it might be. That's also exciting, because then it has a whole new life in new readers' hands, basically. So no, it was a worry, but I'm super excited with now how it's turned out, and returning to it, and actually being able to go back and kind of finesse the story a little bit more, not having 15 years, 10 years experience now as a storyteller, as working in the industry, working with a lot of great writers over the years. It's just nice to go back to make it live a little bit stronger in book form, basically. It was always meant to be in book. That was always my idea, but you're updating for the web. You kind of have a kind of particular cadence to your storytelling to keep updates exciting and regular, but that necessarily doesn't work in a book. So I'll be going back in quite a bit to expand and embellish the story a little bit for print as well, which I'm really excited about.
Well, the story itself, one of the things I found refreshingly different is that Nadia and the non-antagonist characters pretty much across the board, they aren't super powered. They're not exceptional. They're fantastical.
Yeah.
But the characters feel way more integrated into the landscape of the story as a whole than if you had Superman, and how that just natively, brings him and distances him from everything else.
Yeah.
So I think it made him very, very approachable. The entire story felt like this wonderful amusement park ride.
That's great.
Yeah. So what made you kind of choose to not give anybody superpower? I mean, they're dragons, right? And you have all these creatures, but they're not jazzed, I guess.
No, I guess I know what you mean. I think I've always loved the kind of underdog elements. Like Superman is a great character, but yeah, he's all powerful. He can pretty much do anything he wants. But I always fell in love with the idea of these, I guess misfit. Like I'm trying to figure out a way to explain it. Like the misfit of what's that? I can't remember the name of the title. The Island of Misfit Toys, I believe it was, or something like that, where they're special in their uniqueness, but they're like pretty much just regular people in their world, and the kind of idea in this world, they're all just the monsters and the weird kooky creatures and stuff. They're, for the most part, they're just regular people in that world. They don't have anything special beyond maybe one might have an aptitude for something, one might breathe fire for the most part, but at the end of the day, it's just they're no one's above and beyond more spectacular than the other character. And I think that stems a little bit from, I think, me moving around a lot as a kid. I'd always I moved around quite a bit, and I'd always connect with the misfits at schools, or the alt kids and stuff like that. And I think it was just a normal scenario. So this was a kind of, I think, a way to translate that into these otherworldly characters. And I have plenty more that are going to be coming along, and which kind of speak to that as well. They're like, and they look above and beyond their different skins, and their, ones, like I said, they're all vastly different, but they're all there to help each other out and get along. So I don't know, it's an element I've always enjoyed of the whole idea of like monsters aren't necessarily scary. Kind of like, I think Monsters Inc. did a great job of this in the Pixar movie as well. So I think that's just kind of my approach to those characters. They're crazy, they're flashy, they're spectacular visually, but at the end of the day, they're just like you and me. You know. Yeah.
Yep. I don't think it's any surprise after this that you transitioned to doing something with Jim Henson's world either, because it's much the same,
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I grew up on a healthy diet of the Muppets, you could actually kind of see that sensibility in the Muppets. It's the same thing. They're all these misfits, the comedian who's not the funniest guy. You got, Kermit, the Miss Piggy, and all that. And I think that definitely, formed my psyche quite a bit when I was a kid growing up.
Well, people of our age, I think you can't escape it. That's
yeah.
So you've designed all of the Raid Press books to date, if I was reading correctly, the Kickstarter ones, yeah? So I wanted to get into Raid in a minute, but how excited were you to get to put your own project together, book for yourself? So, and what were you just dying to make sure you got right or add in? What are lessons learned kind of thing?
I mean, I think every book I do, there's a lesson learned. So I went to school for graphic design and children's book publishing. So in one aspect was actually book design and stuff like that. So it's something I really love doing, and working on the Raid Press books has been kind of almost a wish fulfillment, and the ability to make these books as pretty as we can and try new things and interesting things with them. As a designer, and try out different papers and different finishes and that sort of thing. And with every project I do, there is a bit of a learning curve, and we'll try sometimes to experiment a little bit and try new things. And with Kukuburi, it's no different. It probably is even harder with my own thing, because I'm being that much more. I can be particular with other people's things, but at the end of the day, I let them have the final say, because it's their book, not mine. I'm just coming in there to help them realize their vision, basically. So with my own, it's like now I have two of me sparring with each other, trying to figure out what the best decision is for this book. I mean, I'll be trying a whole lot of, I guess, with the book finishes. I'm still in talks with the printer mid-campaign, because I actually want to do kind of like a really special edition before the campaign is out. We're hoping to launch one more version of the book, but I don't have the metrics yet from the printer if it's possible what I want to do.
Okay.
So it's like I'm like we literally have a meeting Tuesday morning with the printer and to see if what I want to do is possible. If I can do it, it'll be I will shout it from the rooftops come Tuesday. But it's fun just to experiment with just the paper quality, the finishes, spot glosses, foil stamping, everything. So as for making what I'm excited to do with this book, beyond the finishes, it's actually just, as I mentioned earlier, is actually just I'll be adding in about 40 or 50 new pages to the story, because what's online now is about half of what's going in the book. Because I'm breaking it up into chapters to make it easier to kind of work on and then sell it. Each book will be a chapter. So that's actually the most part I'm excited about doing, is actually going in and just finessing the story, the visuals, adding pages between pages just to kind of have the flow work a little bit better. and yeah, and that's probably the part I'm most excited about, is actually just to have this story be at a place where I envisioned it so long ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's dive into RAID, or the Royal Academy of Illustration and Design. That sounds fancy.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what an amazing collective of creatives you guys got going on. So what is RAID all about, aside from it's centered in one of my favorite cities in the world? So
really?
Toronto is a great city.
Oh yeah, I love it here. It's truly an awesome city. Yeah, I mean, so RAID basically it's been around. It's our 20th anniversary this year. And it started off with 4 guys, probably the most famous of which these days is Chip Zdarsky, who I'm working with actually on Stillwater for Skybound Entertainment. So him and a few fellow graduates basically wanted a place to work together, and started a studio. And I was one of the first replacement members that came in. And then I kind of just, after a while, all the originals left, and I kind of just took over running the show. And we began to just expand over the years, and what started as 4 became 8, became 16, and then just about a year before the pandemic hit, we moved into a much larger space. And here, basically, I think we expanded to about enough to seat about 25 members, but we have a street front gallery, and we have some meeting rooms in the back and stuff like that, a cafe, and we really want to build a community element. So it's actually kind of hilarious, because the pandemic almost killed us in one way, because a lot of members stopped coming in, and so we were down to the bare bones, the skeleton crew, if you will. But inadvertently, it allowed us to actually do a lot of stuff as well and finish the space we were in, because we had a lot of renovations to do. But right after the pandemic, we welcomed almost a half dozen to 10 new members, which brought all these crazy new talent bases and personalities to the space, which is one thing I love. I mean, I've been part of this space now for probably 16 years. And the thing I love about it, why I'm still here, is because I just love being in a creative environment where everybody here is a storyteller in some regard. We all do different things. Some people work in television, some people work in kids' books, fashion, whatever it might be. But a lot of us we want to tell our own stories, we want to do our own thing. And so the Kickstarter, the whole idea of RAID Press actually came out from, or it elevated from what we originally started in 2017, which was the crew at the time. We wanted to do anthologies, just kind of get our own stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And basically we did that. We self-funded, and we put these collections out, and just kind of having fun with our own stories. But the pandemic, allowed us to refocus our energies. And with the new talent that came in, the new personalities that came in, really built up a wonderful team of people here that allowed us to kind of band together to create something that's actually viable. So we, when we go up and do a Kickstarter, I might be designing the book, I might be designing some of the graphics, but we have another guy doing the video, we have another guy doing the curation behind the scenes, setting up our cross promotions, and it works. I wouldn't say it's a well-oiled machine quite yet. It's it's a learning curve, but it's pretty amazing to see everybody come together, and each of us, this team just uplifts every campaign that we've done, and because they know when they do their campaign, everybody will be there for them as well, it's been so wonderful to see that. And so right now, Kukuburi is as a group, our 5th campaign together, and it just makes me excited to what's possible. So this collective here is basically a bunch of freelancers just doing their own thing, but we team up and we work on projects together, and whether they be our own things, and sometimes it's for clients as well. But it's a really energizing, creative space with people from varying walks of life, it's pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I watched the video that was on the website, the
Oh yeah,
comic book
okay.
artist next generation video, which was
Yep.
it was excellent. I've been a professional artist and I've worked with them for almost 30 years of my life.
Oh,
And
nice.
I don't think most people understand the toll that it
Mhm.
can take on you, you know. So listening to Francis articulate that, you
Mhm.
know, after working 10 hours a day and trying
Yeah.
to put that art into the world, I just don't think it's appreciated. You know, when you pick up that comic book, the average reader just doesn't know how much, you know, blood, sweat, and tears goes in on an everyday
Oh
basis.
yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
I
true.
hope everybody takes the time to go back, check it out on the website. It's a really, really cool video. So yeah.
Yeah, that was produced by a good friend of mine, Stephen Christie and FJ DeSanto, and they were awesome because they wanted to actually give that insight into the industry, which kind of wasn't. It's not really like people aren't really aware of. Like they know we work hard, you know, but like you don't really see that on the page sometimes. You know, like I mean, obviously you see the work on the page, but the amount of work is sometimes it's there's a disconnect with like you know the 14 16-hour days sometimes that you're putting on the page, especially as an artist, because that takes the labor is a lot more involved basically, you know,
Yep.
having worked both sides of the angle. You know, it definitely is long days sometimes, but it's exciting like when it actually gets out there in people's hands and they appreciate it. It's wonderful, but it's good to know that something's out there to kind of give them an insight into
Yeah.
all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've been in the business for decades now. I hate to say decades because it makes me feel old.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right. But let's say I'm a young illustrator artist, you know,
Mhm.
wanting to get into the comics business. I'm not going to ask you how to break in. That's a journey every individual has to go through.
Yeah,
Pathways are different, right? But
exactly. Yeah.
what advice do you have for that person who's trying to find their own artistic voice? Because I've had so many students over the years ask me that.
I mean, I think it's difficult because I think every artist to a degree struggles with what is their artistic voice, and some kind of land on it quicker,
Yep.
and other people it takes a lot longer to get there. You know, I think a lot of us grow up, obviously delving into our influences, looking at different things. And I think there's this natural transition point when you stop directly looking. I think you're always looking, you're always absorbing from different artists around you, you're always being inspired. But there's a point where you're so involved in the work itself that you kind of forget about that other stuff. And I think that's where the magic of your own voice kind of starts to come out. It's almost like when you stop thinking about it because you're too, or at least that's how it happened for myself. Like, because I was kind of thrown into so much work, I didn't have a time to kind of always go look at how would so and so tackle this, or how would this guy tackle this. Like I would just like, I have to tackle this, so I better get it done because the client will be unhappy. And so I think it's one of those. I often tell people it's I think there's two learning patterns to being an art, especially a freelance artist or a freelance creative for that matter. There's the slow aspect where you're taking your time, you're learning your skill set, you're building your talent, whether it's like, your foundational elements. If you're an artist, for example, how to draw buildings, your perspective, your anatomy, and all that kind of thing. But I think there's another aspect where it's trial by fire, where you're just thrown into it and you don't have time to niggle with little details on the page or reference hunt for hours for whatever it might be. You're just having to do and get it done, because oftentimes a client will go, hey, I need this for 20 days from now and it's 30 pieces of artwork, can you do this? And you're like, yeah, I guess I can do this. And then you just dive in and do it. And I found that was kind of often in my career what happened. And because you can see, like, I did a project early on in my career where it was a graphic novel, which I did over the course of about 2 years in small installments. And you could actually see if you were to look through it, you could probably see my influences in every chapter, because I was doing it over such a long period of time. I was, I was wearing my influences on my sleeve, if you will. But then after, my career took off, that kind of, I didn't have time to do all the nuanced shifting. And I think that's where my own voice kind of started to emerge. And then a project like Tale of Sand was one where I was allowed by the client to kind of let loose. And that's probably my most me book to date at that time, basically. Aside of my personal work, basically. But yeah, it's a long journey being an artist, I think. And I also like to tell artists or creatives, don't compare yourself to anybody else along the way, because everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own timeline. What might happen in 2 years for one person might happen in 5 or 10 years for you. And that's not wrong. It's just, that's your journey, and that's fine.
Yeah, take the idea and the conceptual idea of fairness out of it, and you'll be much happier with your artistic journey. Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah, because I know a lot of people can get a little bit wound up about that sort of thing. Like, why is so and so having more success and I'd be working longer? Or, and I'll be honest, early in my early days, it crossed my mind a couple of times. But then I was like, I struggled for 10 years trying to get comic work, but then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go do my own stuff and work on kids' books and other things. And then when the time is right, the other thing will happen. It did, and, I'm quite the happier for it, probably.
Yeah. Well, let's circle back to Kukuburi. This the first volume.
Yes.
You're definitely not putting this down. Where are we going from here after this Kickstarter's over? What's the next step?
Well, this is, I'm kind of putting a lot of weight on this Kickstarter for myself, basically, because as I said earlier, this is my 10 years in comics at this point, give or take, but it's a good decade. And the project I'm working on right now for Skybound, I'm doing the last story arc, and that's ending by the end of the year, or at least my portion, my contribution to it. And then after that, it'll be released when it's on its own schedule. But my hope as an individual is to actually do Kukuburi and Raid Press full time in 2023. So I'm kind of pointing to the bleachers and really trying to make a go of working on my own independent creations and building a small boutique publishing press that can help other creators do the same thing. I had a lot of struggles early on in my career trying to get my ideas out there, trying to get people to take me seriously. I didn't have the right credentials, or maybe I just wasn't as good at networking as I back then. So really just trying to create something that's a kind of a door to you might not be the biggest name, but here you got a good story. You got the art solid. Let's get your stuff out there and get people aware of it. Because sometimes some people just need that first book out there to then be taken seriously. So yeah, I'm giving it my all, and that's pretty much the plan moving forward. So ideally, should things work out, knock on wood, it's a volume of Kukuburi a year for the next 5-6 years, basically, to finish the story.
Yep.
So by the time this one is being released, I'll be probably a couple of months afterwards, I'll be launching the Kickstarter for the next one, and so on and so forth. And I have a few other projects as well of my own that I want to get off the ground that I've been kind of scribbling away at and writing over the past several years. So I know what I'm capable of a year, and if things work out, then I can kind of balance that with Kukuburi and make that my full-time job. So that's the goal, basically. I figure better late than never. And, I'm eager to play in my own world again after 10 years of playing with Marvel's characters and DC characters and all this other stuff, and collaborating with a lot of great collaborators, which I've learned a lot from, just to take that knowledge and that skill set now and return to my sandbox, if you will, and build my own castles.
Yeah, I mean, I always love to give full disclosure. I'm a backer myself. I was from the first day. I had the exposure, through Forest Folk, which a fellow raid member was running, right?
Mhm.
You've already smashed your funding goals that were initially set out. We're on kind of the home stretch of the campaign.
Yeah, 5 days. Yeah.
Yep. So what are some of the cool funding goals we've hit so far, that have been added? We want to encourage stragglers here.
Oh, for sure.
Listening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So basically there are 2 versions of the book. There's a soft cover and a hardcover that people can invest in. And the contents will be the same. It's just some people like a hardcover, some people like a soft cover. They'll have different covers. For the extras that people will get on top of for free, basically, if they purchase either of the books in the Kickstarter, you'll get a static cling, which are like those little great things you can put on a window or a computer or whatever it might be. They stick anywhere, of the main character with a couple of the other fantastical characters. You'll get a poster, 18 by 24 poster of the whole cast and the world, which it was kind of an impromptu idea, so I haven't drawn it yet, but it'll look awesome, trust me. And so that, and then we're getting the stretch goal we just cracked was what we're calling chase cards. So a chase card is basically like a rare card from a card set. So we're doing, as Raid Press, we're kind of looking into doing a large card set in the new year as a kind of way to, get people aware of what we're doing. It's a fun collectible way. People can, and so each creator will get their own set within the set of trading cards, if you will. And these chase cards are just kind of a fun, rare card that backers will get that go along with the main set, basically. And then currently the next stretch card, the next stretch goal we're hopefully closing in on is a big sticker to everybody. There's 3 out there. You can vote on which one we do. And that's pretty much the stretch goals we have right now. We have a few more planned, depending on the numbers.
Sure.
Things I would like to do is get everybody like a nice little enamel pin. We did some great ones for the Forceful campaign, which are these wonderful little nice enamel pins, and they look great. So I would love to do one of maybe Rendo, actually would probably be the best guy to do first. And the earlier you back, there's also our backer rewards. So the people who back the earliest are getting a mini art print. And then anybody who backs who was a 600 and under backer gets a bookmark. And if you're an 800 and under backer, you'll get a magnet of Mr. Bones, which is the villain from the book. Excuse me.
Yep.
So we have a few more planned. And we have some special editions, but I think they're all. Oh no, actually, I think we have a sketch edition available still, which is basically the hardcover with an original piece of art by myself, featuring the Kukuburi characters, basically. And and so, but at the end of the day, even if you're just buying the book, the regular book, you're getting a whole bunch of fun stuff thrown in that you can stick around on your walls, your fridge, your books, whatever it might be. And whatever extras we can still achieve, I'm happy to throw in there, because I think that's part of the fun of the Kickstarters, right? You just get all these little extras that kind of are unique to the backers of the campaign. So yeah, and just not the book, it's a little bit more.
Well, take care of your hands. You're going to be doing so much sketching. You're going to end up with carpal tunnel.
Yeah, I estimated, I guess, how many sketches I could do after talking to a few artists who had done similar editions as I've done. And I was like, okay. So I said, okay, I'll do 150. It's painful, but I can pull it off over X amount of months. It'll take a little bit longer to do. So there are a few still left, but if people want some original art, they are there. But it's fun. I get to draw my own characters, doing and having fun. So that's always an inspiring thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, I always like to check with people who are successfully launching crowdfunding comics campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
What advice they would give to themselves, right? So you could step back before you started.
Well, I think I had the luck of doing a few. I mean,
yeah,
there is a lot to prepare. Like we prepared for months before Kukuburi, and I still didn't feel I was ready. because you just don't know how the campaign's going to go and all the extras. It's hard to plan everything, right? So you just have to be ready to work on the fly while the campaign is going on. Be ready to pivot, luckily, because we've done a few campaigns already, I had a bunch of contacts already for, a pin place, a print place. So I know the costs offhand. So that definitely helped a lot. But if it's your first campaign, definitely source out your costs beforehand, so you know what everything will cost you, and prepare. So like if you're doing a stretch goal, for example, like make sure to cover all your costs plus a little bit extra, because there's always going to be something that happens that costs a little bit more, or
shipping.
Shipping's another one. Right now, especially now, shipping's quite volatile. It's shifting all over the place. So we found after our first couple of campaigns, it was best to exclude shipping and do that afterward, just because the numbers were constantly changing due to, I guess, delays around the world due to the pandemic over the past couple of years, and supplies and sort. And and if you're doing a book or whatever it might be, contact your printer, find out what it's going to cost for how many units you estimate or hope you will need to get to basically cover your costs. So just plan basically. We have a Discord forum for the Raid Studio. If you ever want to ask questions, you can sign up to that. It's all off our website. We're always happy to share information. We're quite transparent with that kind of stuff, because the more people that get better at it, everybody wins at the end of the day. So
yeah. So where can everybody find you online?
For myself, I was going to say my website, but I just got hacked during the campaign.
Oh, no.
My website is completely down. So right now, probably the best place to find me is Instagram, which is Ramon Perez, RamonPerez. I hope to have my website back up in the next few months. I'm going to take the opportunity of the hack to just basically rebuild it from the ground up, make it more current, if you will.
As you have to, yeah.
Yeah. So when that's back up, that'll be the same thing, RamonPerez.com. So those are probably the best two places to find me right now, but the Instagram being the more active. And I have my links, all my links are on my page for Instagram, so it's quite easy.
All right. Yeah. Well, I was in love with the style of this project from the beginning.
Well, thank you.
I hope we've teased enough to encourage everybody to get in before the campaign ends, because it's an amazing project. Ramon, thanks for chatting with me today, and thanks for sharing your creative voice with all of us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Much appreciated, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, this is Byron O'Neal on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti. Thanks for listening in, and see you next time.
Ciao.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. We also have a podcast of the same name that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.